On today's episode of History with Holland, I will be discussing the history of the moving walkway and how and why we have the version of it we do today. First, I would like to begin with why the moving walkway became such a fascination during the 19th century. In 1871, German inventor Alfred Speer patented a system of moving walkways that he believed would be the solution for how hectic pedestrian travel was in the extremely crowded city of New York. This was because major elevated train systems, as shown in the picture, began to appear during the 1870s after their invention in the late 1860s. Due to this, business owners in the area were forced to compete with pedestrians for the lessened street space. Therefore, Speer introduced the idea, which he called endless traveling or railway sidewalk, in order to speed up pedestrians in many more overcrowded cities. This sidewalk, which included both seating and standing areas, was supposed to move at about 10 miles per hour, which was over double the speed of the average person walking. The sidewalk was also supposed to be steam-powered. These two aspects emphasized three of many human values or fascinations during this time period: speed, efficiency, and energy. Unfortunately, Speer's plan was vetoed by the New York City governor, and it wasn't until 1893 when the first moving sidewalk was built to be used at the Columbian Exchange in Chicago, despite its unreliability. It was operated by the Columbian Movable Sidewalk Company, and they charged 5 cents for a ride and ran almost 3,500 feet long, transporting guests. After this walkway had burned down in a fire, a version of it was used in the 1900 World's Fair in Paris, as shown in this clip. This walkway, on the other hand, was nicknamed the Wooden Serpent with a tail in its mouth, and many people believed that it would be the future of urban transportation. The shape was square, and there were 10 places where people could enter it. Since it was raised 30 feet above the ground, people described the walkway as a way to get a new and peculiar view. There were 3 lanes, as you can see in this picture, for the walkway that correspond to 3 different speeds. As you could see in the previous clip, the people on this walkway had used it for smoking, transportation, and communication. Although this walkway was successful in achieving its goal of transporting guests during the World's Fair, moving walkways did not come into common use until the 1950s. In 1955, an article explained how tedious it was to have to carry luggage all throughout the airports. Therefore, airports were the first to incorporate moving walkways into their systems in 1958, with the Dallas Love Field Terminal as shown in this image. This usage strategically opened new doors for airports' ability to expand, because as people were beginning to get richer, they also wanted to travel more. Airports became larger and larger, and with the implementation of these walkways, people were allowed to get from point A to point B at a much faster rate, which ultimately made people more content and willing to fly. To this day, the reason why moving walkways are essential in airports remains the same: an easier time to get to the correct terminal. In addition to airports, Goodyear Tire Company in the 1950s proposed that these walkways, like the one he designed in this picture, also be used in sports stadiums and subway stations to, again, make it easier to get from point A to point B. His idea was featured in many books and comics about how the people during the time would predict the future. They imagined a life where moving sidewalks figured out ways to smoothly transport them as quickly as possible. In fact, this potential is shown during the beginning of the Jetsons theme song in 1962. You can see all of the characters flying through their spaceship, with George Jetson finally being dropped off onto the moving sidewalk. This shows just how much potential people believe this invention to have if it was being used in the same show as a spaceship that transforms into a briefcase. Here is an image of the vision people saw when they thought of moving walkways, in a slightly more realistic fashion than in the Jetsons. People imagined larger malls in the future would no longer be tied up by vehicles, and that all shoppers and sightseers will be transported by these mobile walkways as if they were on large conveyor belts. Now let's fast forward into the 21st century. Today, moving walkways exist in many more places, such as amusement parks, stadiums, airports, and many more. Although it isn't as special to see one of these as it was during the 19th and 20th century, the values of increasing efficiency embedded in this system when it was first invented still remains. As of right now, Otis Elevator, Cone, Schlender, and ThyssenKrupp are the leaders in creating, implementing, and finding new and better ways to use these moving walkways by making them more enjoyable for its users. One way that airports and these companies are working together to make them more enjoyable is enhancing its aesthetics. These new, nicer walkways resemble more closely the idea of what people had in the 20th century. In addition to these aesthetics, these companies are working to find better ways to power these walkways to make them more energy efficient. This idea was shown before when people in the 20th century began powering these systems with steam power, a very popular energy form of their time. However, now people are focusing on how to make the walkway use less energy while on instead of finding the best source of energy. For example, these companies are trying to find ways to maximize the amount of energy they are using by figuring out technologies that slow down the walkway when it isn't in use, but to accelerate them when they are more crowded. This change slightly shows a glimpse of the new and improved walkway that ThyssenKrupp hopes to release soon. They claim to have developed a high-speed and high-capacity moving walkway named Excel using magnetic levitation technology that contains a conveyor-like belt that begins at walking speed and then accelerates up to 7.5 miles per hour.
Hey, just some time.
Hey, that was fast.
Successful implementation of this will decrease the amount of people who have been injured on these walkways by answering how quickly they can actually go. Also, it will allow the user to get from point A to point B faster, which was the entire reasoning of why and for who this technology was created for, the user and to decrease traffic. The future of these walkways is unlimited, as many people believe, and as it continues to develop, it will only continue to make our lives as pedestrians easier. I hope you enjoyed watching, and join us next time on the next episode of History with Holland.